And speaking of his trans friend, Mr. Beast says the hurdles gender nonconforming people have to jump through to get life-saving gender-affirming healthcare in a first-world country is wild to me. Life-saving? Well, in a second, I'll show you a study out of Sweden that shows that is an outright lie. That gender-affirming healthcare not only doesn't save lives, but they actually have a higher suicide rate after the gender-affirming healthcare. Welcome back to the JP Reacts channel, my beautiful freedom-loving friend, where we like to call out the lies and hypocrisy of tyrants, shine the light of awareness on woke absurdities, and highlight the amazing work of other freedom fighters. Today's topic, I think it's relevant because it has to do with objective truth and the assault on it through gender ideology. Beautiful thing. So the gist here is Mr. Beast, who has the biggest YouTube channel in the world, the guy he poops out videos that have 100 million views. He's wildly popular. So it came out a little while ago that someone on his team and a friend, so a guy that he collaborates with, a man named Chris Tyson, is now transitioning into being a woman. Cool. And that sparked some controversy. People are concerned, Mr. Beast, so many people watch him. How will this negatively impact children, seeing like this example of mutilate your body, that sort of thing. And then Mr. Beast is punching back. He is criticizing the criticizers, and the plot thickens because now there's speculation that he actually just fired his trans friend. How is that for being transphobic, Mr. Beast? So, taking a quick look at the latest news on the situation. This is from Upward News on Instagram. I love their stuff, by the way. YouTuber Mr. Beast, popular with kids. Can't stress that enough. Mostly kids watch his stuff. Promotes trans ideology. What's happening, you ask? Well, Upward News says Mr. Beast, also known as Jimmy Donaldson, is the most subscribed to individual on YouTube with over 148 million subscribers, just a few ahead of me, and over 25 billion video views. His videos are especially popular among kids. His close friend and frequent co-host Chris Tyson recently came out as transgender, began the sex change process, and appeared on a recent Mr. Beast live stream. Many are concerned that Tyson's broadcasted transition will indoctrinate or confuse Donaldson's young audience. I personally would be concerned about that as well. So a couple thoughts before we get to the rest of this stuff we're gonna get to. For Mr. Beast being wildly popular, and then we also know that promoting this man is actually a woman, and you can too, kids. We know that can be incredibly divisive. We see what happens with Bud Light. So the question would be, one question is not only how bad is this for kids? Pretty bad, spoiler alert, but also, will this hurt Mr. Beast's popularity? I know if I had a child who's watching Mr. Beast and now there's gonna be gender ideology either aggressively pushed or just passively, because you see it by example, I would take Mr. Beast's channel off of what my son is allowed to watch. That would happen. So we saw what happened with Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney, a rather successful sales prevention strategy where Bud Light lost a massive amount of customers. And it doesn't look like there's any stopping in progress. So will this cause Mr. Beast to bleed viewers, lose subscribers, be bad for his business? I don't know. It might be a Bud Light situation. If anything, it's not going to be nearly that phenomenal because I think Mr. Beast's audience, it's not prime freedom-loving Americans. It's, kids who are probably already fairly indoctrinated themselves. So most kids watching his stuff probably don't see a reason to boycott because they're already influenced by the propaganda. But I would also say his friend Chris Tyson, the man who is now transitioning to be a man, wearing women's clothes, taking women's hormones, don't know about the surgery yet. Here you can see Chris Tyson. He's a very double X chromosome kind of guy, or is it XY, whatever the male chromosomes are. And the plot thickens. His trans friend Chris has a wife and kid. Now, I don't know the situation. Is he leaving the wife and kid? I mean, the kid kind of loses a masculine father, whether he stays in the kid's life or not. That's a bit of a concern. So I don't know the situation. Like, is he leaving the wife and kid? If so, I would have a lot of judgment about that. If he's staying with them, cool. I have less judgment about that. It becomes just more concern than anything. And then you can see the same guy. This is him post hormone replacement replacement therapy. So now that man is a woman. It's a woman because he said so. But my point with outlining that is this is a man. He's an adult. So I fully support him exercising his freedom to do whatever the hell he wants with his body. It'd be different if this was a 12-year-old boy. Then it's like, dude, somebody has to step in, intervene, and protect this child. He's an adult. I don't know how old he is, but he's an adult. And I fully support him doing whatever he wants to do. I don't have to agree with his motives. His motives might be based on complete falsehood. They might be based on mental instability. I don't know that they are. It's possible, but I love freedom. So you are free to do with you whatever you want. So I got no problem with the gender transition. It's like, cool, do what you want. I support you doing what you want. The concern, of course, though, is how will this ideological influence children? It serves as walking, talking propaganda for children. So that's, of course, anything that invades the mind of a child and puts suggestions in them that are harmful and permanent. That's what I'm against. But I know anybody who doesn't necessarily think like you and I, they want to look at someone like me and say, you're a transphobic. To you, I say, I don't care what you think. The second thing I say to you is, I fully support this person doing what they want to do. It's freedom. Great. No problem with that. And then we click over here, Fox News, which their viewership is now cut in half. Actually, they've lost more than half their nightly viewers. Hilarious. But nonetheless, the article says, top YouTuber Mr. Beast slams those criticizing his trans friend. Mr. Beast says, transphobia is starting to piss me off. And with that, I'm guessing Mr. Beast, like so many others who love to haphazardly throw out the term to smear people, transphobic. I'm guessing they're off base. Because most people, like, if you're not just all in, like, rainbow colors and, like, dude, cut the genitals off that little boy, like, he's 7. He's definitely ready for it. Unless you're doing that, you're considered transphobic. Whereas if they were able to, like, access their prefrontal cortex and seek to understand prior to accusing people of transphobia, they might start to understand, at least someone like me, maybe you, I have zero problems with an adult doing whatever they want to their body. If you're a man and want to cut things off, take female hormones, zero problem with that. I support freedom and how you choose to express freedom. But the nuance that I'm against, wholeheartedly against, is promoting this to children who don't have a fully formed brain to make permanent, unalterable decisions about their body. Surgery, hormones, that is what I'm against. Secondly, most of all, I'm against the sexualization of children, whether it's heterosexualization, homosexualization, or transsexualization. That is extremely inappropriate. And I fully support Ron DeSantis's bill to offer the death penalty to child sexual offenders. If they could holster their smear term transphobic, then they might be able to understand the nuance. But we realize most people who are getting ready to rage cry, they're not out for nuanced conversations. They're in a state of emotional reaction. They're working mostly on their reptilian brain, not accessing their thinking part of the brain that's necessary to listen, understand, and have nuanced thinking and nuanced conversations. So we're not going to ask too much. We know that's not going to happen. So in the article, Mr. Beast, in response to a video from a fellow YouTuber delving into the controversy of the content creator's biological male friend becoming a trans woman, Mr. Beast, whose real name is Jimmy Donaldson, claimed that the mounting transphobia against his friend is starting to piss me off. Cool, so he wrote that on Twitter. Who really cares? And then getting to Mr. Beast being incredibly off base, and this is a lie that is just accepted as the wholesale truth by people on the left, and it's extreme. This is an extremely dangerous lie. It actually costs people their lives. And it's a lie that says gender affirming care saves lives. Well, cool. Just because you said it doesn't mean it's true. And in fact, studies show the opposite. Before we get to the study, here's what Mr. B says. The hurdles that gender nonconforming people have to jump through to get life-saving gender-affirming healthcare in a first world country is wild to me. Well, what's wild to me is that he believes that. Just because, like, you might support trans people, you might have a trans friend, but that doesn't mean that this is true. And it doesn't mean that you have to propagate a lie. And in fact, what if we found out advertising something as this is life-saving, but that very thing that you're advertising is life-saving actually statistically causes more death, causes more suicide. Safe and effective, get the idea? Same thing is going on with the gender-affirming care. Now, this is a study you can see on this screen. It's incredibly boring looking, as all studies are. I've come across this a number of times, so I looked it up because I thought it was relevant to this video. And this was long-term follow-up transsexual persons undergoing sex reassignment surgery. Cohort study in Sweden. Now, one thing that I think is very noteworthy about this study, the setting. This took place, following up and monitoring these folks post-surgery, took place between 1973 and 2003. Now, during that period, starting in 1973, you didn't have to be politically correct and lie. That was a time frame where, if someone was curious about, transition surgery, then what are the suicide rates after it compared to people not going through the surgery? You could just report whatever the results were. You didn't have to fear being labeled transphobic if you reported the wrong thing. If your actual science goes against the science, you didn't have to worry about that. So that's very relevant because that would help indicate this is most likely valid scientific study. So here with the results, sex reassigned persons also had an increased risk for suicide attempts. What's that? That is not the narrative. Sex reassigned persons who have gone through gender affirming care surgeries had an increased risk of suicide attempts. Now, the whole propaganda says, no, these people are suicidal because they're not in the right body, and if they don't get the care, they will be at risk of taking their own lives. They're suicidal because they're in the wrong body. That's what the propaganda says. But a curious question could say, are they trying to escape their body because the suicidal thoughts came first from whatever trauma that is unresolved? I mean, it's so unfortunate, but have some unresolved trauma. Suicide, it's an ultimate attempt to try to escape yourself. Now, flipping your gender, that's a moderate attempt. Actually pretty potent, pretty high, not as high as suicide, but it's a high attempt to try to escape yourself. So the curious question is, are you suicidal because you're not getting the gender transition surgery? Or do you want the gender transition surgery because the suicidal seed, the trauma that causes one to commit suicide, that was planted first, and therefore the desire to flip your gender is there in an effort to try to escape yourself? That's the question. This study would suggest the latter might be more based in reality. And then the conclusions of this study. Persons with transsexualism after sex reassignment have considerably higher risks for mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity than the general population. Our findings suggest that sex reassignment, although alleviating gender dysphoria, may not suffice as treatment for transsexualism and should inspire improved psychiatric and somatic care after sex reassignment for this patient group. So that's basically saying if you get sexual reassignment surgery, don't take that as a cure for suicidal thoughts or deep trauma. You gotta address that. Whether you get the transsexual surgery or not, you gotta address basically your wounded psychology, which is something I highly advocate for. And for a young person, I would highly advocate do that first. Address the wounded psyche, the pain in your psyche first before going through a transition. So I realize that is going against the grain enough. It's rooted in, what is this called, science? But it's not like the science. Fauci didn't say this. Someone rage screaming didn't say this. A man dressed as a woman reading to children and dancing provocatively in front of them didn't say this. So this is probably not real science. So please take my apology on that. But nonetheless, I think that is the most relevant piece, not only one of the most relevant pieces, not only for the overarching gender ideology issue, to say it lightly, that's going on in our country and in our world, but it's also extremely relevant to the Mr. Beast situation, because Mr. Beast's own words is gender affirming care is life-saving, when in fact it's not. This study would actually suggest gender affirming care is life-risking, because there's an increased risk for suicide post-gender transition. So I would dare say Mr. Beast's words are not only inaccurate, but harmful. But hey, I love freedom of speech, so I'm all about him saying inaccurate things, even dangerous things. I just think it's important that there's an open conversation, because the truth shall prevail. That's why when someone says something dumb, or that's actually truth, but against the narrative, the left would say we need to silence them because it's dangerous. Well, in a free-thinking society where free speech pervades and tyranny doesn't, the logic would have it, cool, you say something dumb or dangerous, then present a better counter idea. Now, if your counter idea is based on falsehood and lies, welcome to 1984, then your idea, it's not going to win out. The counter isn't going to win, because typically what is based in truth will win. And that's why I think it's important to share the truth about this conversation around Mr. Beast and his transgender friend, collaborator. But just closing the loop on the plot thickening aspect of this situation, back to the Upward News report, the backlash. Tyson, so Mr. Beast's transgender friend, who goes by any pronouns. Dude, how's that for being sure of who you are? Like, any pronouns. All of them. I'm all pronouns. Cool. I guess you've achieved a state of nirvana if you're all things. Went public with his announcement that he is undergoing hormone replacement therapy earlier this month, stating that informed consent HRT saved my and many other lives. That's a lie, but that's just based on science. He also said he's so glad that so many people are learning about hormone treatments thanks to the exposure he's gotten, which suggests he's very much excited about influencing other children. This sparked a divisive conversation between viewers and non-viewers of Mr. Beast alike, many pointing out that Tyson has a wife and son, suggesting that he has abandoned them. I don't know if that's true. This is just reporting. Some people are suggesting that. Tyson also sparked further controversy when he posted a picture of his son wearing high heels. Yikes. But here's where the plot thickens. But rumors began circulating a few days ago that Donaldson, Mr. Beast, had fired Tyson. If that's true, does that make Mr. Beast transphobic? I think it does. Typically what you accuse other people of being. Anyway, the channel has not put out a video in over 3 weeks, which actually is not atypical for Mr. Beast's channel. He's got so much production involved that they're not pumping out multiple videos every week like I do. I guess he puts time and energy into it. Yeah, he's just got huge production scale, so I'm not going to read too much into the haven't put out a video for 3 weeks, but this part's relevant. And it appeared that the group of hosts traveled without Tyson to create their next video in Paris. So now they're saying maybe Mr. Beast actually fired this person. And it might not be true, but if it is, we don't know why did Mr. Beast fire his transgender friend. We don't know. But nonetheless, that's my take on the Mr. Beast situation, and also I think other elements like the study out of Sweden showing increased suicide risk for people post-gender affirming surgery. I think that's extremely relevant to the whole cultural conversation, even though they're trying to silence one side of the conversation around gender ideology. I appreciate you watching, but before you go, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, my Freedom line of merch. Defund the media, one of the latest designs. I personally love this. The more we defund the media by not funding it with our attention, our time, our energy, donating, basically at the expense of ourselves, donating very valuable mind space to what the media says, or the mainstream media. That's how we defund the media. When you defund the media, you fund your life with your own thinking and the guidance from your own heart, and also hopefully guidance from God. This is the other new shirt, My Politics, Pro God. You want to talk politics? That's where I stand. But nonetheless, if either of these two new designs are right for you, or you want to check out any of the best-selling classics, you can always go to awakenwithjp.com. Link is also in the description below. If you grab yourself a new piece of merch, I just want to say thank you for the support. I really appreciate you.